Howdy, brothers and sisters. This is Pike in Anchor Point, Alaska. I'm a single Orthodox Christian living on the banks of the Anchor River. I read Orthodox content for us tonight, or at night. I'm going to read Orthodox content for us tonight. Been working in the yard a lot. I had some guests show up, and they brought me some moose soup and some dried rhubarb. I'm thankful for that. I have church in the morning. Worked today for a bit. Got to see my deacon this morning on my way to work. So sitting up at the park. I was sitting up there reading morning prayers by myself before my work. And I just have a couple hours of work after church tomorrow that I can do anytime. So I'm going to read about St. John of Novgorod. I'm going to wait just a second and do small talk. This is half of my apricot scone. That's left over from the Russian bakery at the farmer's market this morning in Homer, Alaska, and it's absolutely epic. This is like a masterpiece of a scone. The icing is perfectly not overdone. A hint of coconut flavor, and the apricot is delicious. I'm from Alaska, but I grew up on a dairy farm in Michigan, and I came up here to fish after high school, and I could never leave. I tried going back to Michigan once, and it was so horrible I couldn't wait to get out of there. But now I have my small farm in Anchor Point, Alaska. Although it's hard, I survived here by the grace of God. And I go to the Old Rite Orthodox Church in Homer, Alaska, that's part of ROCOR. And my priest and my deacon are amazing people. All my church brothers and sisters are amazing people. And yep, it gets pretty cold here. Sometimes it gets minus 20 Fahrenheit, maybe minus 24 Fahrenheit at the most, which is cold. That's a long ways below freezing. But for the most part, in the winters, it's not too bad. I snowshoe. I have a river out front, so I can snowshoe the river. And I fish, and I garden, have a couple small greenhouses. I'm closer to the ocean, so it isn't the horrible negative temperatures like Fairbanks gets. I don't get in the minus 50s ever. But I also don't get the heat like they get in the summer. It's more of a mild summer and an okay winter. They say after so many years in Alaska, you become a sourdough when you hate winter. I think I'm there. I'm not big on the snow. But man, I love the halibut fishing. I love to eat halibut and black cod and crab and clam. So there's always pluses and minuses. But man, Istanbul, it looks like there's some amazing food there. And I usually have a bag of dried figs on my table continually from Turkey. I love those. It's part of my Orthodox diet. So I'm going to read about St. John of Novgorod, the saint who bound a demon and rode it like a horse. So I'll get into my first reading. I've got a couple neat readings for us tonight. Howdy, everybody. Once at midnight, as Archbishop John of Novgorod stood as usual in his cell at prayer, a demon appeared, hoping to frighten him by his presence. He entered the wash basin, which was in the saint's cell, and began to stir up the water. The saint, realizing that this was the work of a demon, approached the vessel, signed it with the cross, and with an oath forbade the demon in the washbin to depart for many hours. Unable to bear the burning he suffered through the power of the cross, the demon began to cry out like a man. "Oh, woe is me, for I am being burned and am unable to endure. Release me quickly, O saint of God." The saint said, "Who are you, and why have you come here?" The devil answered, "I am a wicked demon. I have come to trouble you. I thought that since you are a man, you would take fright and desist from prayer, but instead you have confined me to this vessel, and I am grievously tormented. Woe is me, I was deceived in coming here. Release me, servant of God, and I shall not come to this place again." When the demon had cried out for a long time, the saint said, "For your shameless boldness, I order you to carry me this night to Jerusalem, and to take me to the church of the Holy Sepulchre of the Lord. Then bring me back tonight to my cell, and I will release you." The demon vowed to do the will of the saint, if only he would be released from the vessel, setting him loose. The saint ordered the demon, "Be like a horse standing before my cell, so that when I have mounted you, I may fulfill my desire." The demon fled like the night from the vessel, and he stood as though he were a horse before the cell, as the saint had commanded. The saint left his cell, arming himself with the cross, and sat upon the demon. He arrived that night in the holy city of Jerusalem, near the church of the Holy Sepulchre, where the tomb of our Lord is to be found. He forbade the demon to depart from that place, and so the demon stood there, unable to move, until the saint had venerated the sepulchre of the Lord and the honorable wood of the Holy Cross. As he approached the church, he knelt before the doors and prayed, and immediately the doors opened by themselves, and the candles and lamps in the tomb of the Lord were lit. The saint prayed to God with thanksgiving, shedding tears, and he venerated the tomb of the Lord, kissing it, as he also did the life-giving wood and all the sacred icons and holy places found in the church. When he had completed that which he desired, he departed, and the doors of the church locked themselves. The demon was still in the place where he had been commanded to remain, standing like a horse. The saint then sat upon him and returned to his cell in Novgorod the Great. As he parted from the saint, the demon charged him to tell no one that he had been bound by an oath to serve him like a captive. "If you tell anyone that you have ridden me," he said, "I will not rest until I have succeeded in bringing great temptations upon you." The saint made the sign of the cross upon himself as the demon boasted thus, and the demon immediately vanished like smoke before him. One day, as the saint was engaged in spiritual conversation with men of honor, with the abbots, priests, and the God-fearing citizens of Novgorod, relating to them the lives of the saints and exhorting them with many edifying tales, it happened that he told them what had happened to him. He related it as if it were a story about someone else, saying, "I know a man who in one night went to Jerusalem, venerated the Lord's sepulchre and the life-giving wood of the Holy Cross, and returned again in the same night to Novgorod the Great, riding upon a demon who had been bound like a prisoner. Those who had heard this marveled greatly, but the demon gnashed his teeth at the saint and said, 'As you have related this secret, I will bring upon you a temptation which will be judged by all the citizens as fornication.' And from that time, with God's permission, the demon brought upon the saint the following temptation. To the numerous people who came to the saint to receive a blessing, the devil would produce visions, now of women's sandals, now of necklaces, now of some other trinket or garment that women wear. The people who came were scandalized and thought evil of the saint, imagining that he kept a harlot in his cell. And they were greatly troubled, so they said among themselves, "It is not fitting that such a hierarch, who is a fornicator, should occupy the apostolic throne." Once, when the people were gathered together in the cell of the saint, the demon transformed himself into a girl and ran before the crowds as though fleeing from the saint's cell. The people, catching sight of the wench, cried out and ran after her, hoping to catch the girl. But the demon ran away from the cell of the saint and became invisible. The saint, hearing the uproar of the crowd, came out of his cell and said to the people, "What is this, children? Why this uproar?" But they cried out against him, and seizing him as against a fornicator, reviling and reproaching him, and seizing him, they began to mock him. Not knowing what to do with him, they said, "Let us take him to the river and set him on a raft, so that he may float down the river and away from our city." Then they took the holy and chaste hierarch onto the great bridge which spans the river Volkhov, and they lowered him onto a raft. The wicked demon's words were fulfilled, which he had said in boasting, "I will bring upon you a temptation such as that you will be judged by all the citizens as a fornicator." The evil one rejoiced when he saw the saint mocked. However, since the saint was innocent, the mighty grace of God overcame and shamed the enemy, for when the saint was placed on the raft, it floated upstream against the very current that flowed beneath the bridge, even though as it were steered by no one, but only by the power of God. Then the raft floated to the monastery of St. George, which was located somewhat less than 2 miles from the city. The people, beholding this miracle, were astonished and abandoned their ill intent, rent their garments, and wept, saying, "We have sinned and have done evil, for being ourselves but sheep. But we have judged our shepherd." Going down to the bank of the river, they begged the saint to forgive them their transgression and return to his throne. "Forgive us, Father," they said. "Out of ignorance we sinned against you. Do not remember our iniquities, and do not forsake your children." Likewise, all the clergy came before the saint, and bowing their heads to the ground, they entreated him with tears to return to his throne. He, like a second Stephen, the proto-martyr, prayed to God for those who had offended him, saying, "Lord, lay not this sin to their charge." And landing on the shore about a quarter of a mile from the previously mentioned monastery, he stepped off the raft and onto the bank of the river. The people fell down before him, weeping and asking his forgiveness, and when the saint pardoned them, they were filled with joy. Likewise, they rejoiced that the Lord had revealed his life to be blameless and pure. He, being guileless, granted forgiveness to all, and told them how he was the one who had ridden the demon to Jerusalem, and how the devil had boasted against him. And all who heard this glorified God. Thus the saint returned to his throne with great honor and glory, and he taught the people, saying, "Children, try in every way not to be deceived by the devil, and do not confuse virtue with evil, thereby becoming liable to God's judgment." Glory to God and his saints. The next story I'm going to read for us, I told you I was going to have some good ones tonight. Marilyn Manson warns against black magic. This was written September 18th of 2017. Marilyn Manson warns against black magic. Marilyn Manson was featured on Celebrity Ghost Stories a few days prior to Halloween in 2010. He tells an interesting story of an occult ritual which he participated in when he was in high school and lived in Canton, Ohio. He concludes his story with a warning to those who venture to do something similar. I'm not sure how true this story is. It is not mentioned in his best-selling autobiography or any of his past interviews where he talks about a different experience in his teenage years with the occult. Knowing how much Marilyn Manson loves to use sarcasm, he may have very well made this particular story up just to tell an interesting story for the show. Plus, the Necronomicon, a Greek word that means the law of the dead, is considered a hoax even by occult magicians, which are rituals based on the stories of Lovecraft and Crowley. though of course it still should not be toyed with. I have also visited the neighborhood where Manson grew up in Canton, Ohio, and the way he describes it doesn't fit in with the story, though he does say that the story took place at his friend's house, which may explain it. When the late Jay Thomas was interviewed for the same show, he mentioned elsewhere that he made up his story because they didn't try to verify it, and they offered him $10,000 just to tell a ghost story. The same may be the case with Manson here, whatever the case may be, and the story could be entirely true. His words of advice at the end are still most interesting, coming from a man self-described as the Antichrist superstar and the third and final beast. A note of interest to my Orthodox Christian readers, the house in which Marilyn Manson, aka Brian Warner, grew up in Canton, Ohio, was next door to the home of a Greek Orthodox family whose son later went to the Holy Cross School of Theology in Brookline, Mass, to study for the priesthood. I went to seminary with him and asked him what Manson was like growing up. He said that Brian was very quiet, normal, and nice, and even was his babysitter on many occasions. Since Manson was older and they always had a good time together, and this was around the same time that this story took place. Oh man. Sorry guys, they took it down. It's blocked. Oh, that's disappointing. Well, we'll go on to the next story. I wish I could have gave you the warning that he gave, but now I can't even find it. So I'll read about another saint. Saint Athemos, the serpent hunter of Kephallonia. I still have lots of good stuff to read for us. Venerable Athemos Kourouchlis, the blind ascetic of Kephallonia, who reposed on September 4th, 1782, is also associated with the Greek island of Estipalea, where he did missionary work and performed a number of miracles. It was here that he helped exterminate a huge serpent that nested in a small cave in the northeast of the island, known to this day as Dracospilia or Draconospiliao, translated as Dragon Cave. The serpent instilled such fear in the inhabitants that the entire area behind the narrow part of the island was uninhabited. The saint advised them to cultivate the rest of the island in order to survive. However, he encountered the resistance due to the serpent. Then Anthemos, accompanied by a few faithful witnesses to the remarkable miracle that followed, crossed the narrow passage of the island and reached an elevation where the cave of the dragon could be discerned. At the saint's urging, they cut down wild cypresses that were abundant in the area and formed a large pile with them, like a kind of haystack. When they had finished their work, they saw the monstrous reptile approaching from afar. They reported this to the saint, who advised them to move a little further away and leave it alone. He himself remained praying, begging the Most Holy Theotokos to redeem her place from the satanic plot. Indeed, upon arriving, the serpent curled upon the stack, which even gave way under its weight. Immediately people approached, and at the instigation of the Holy Father Anthemos, they lit fires on the pile. The once fearsome reptile burned without moving from its position or reacting at all. According to the testimonies of the inhabitants, no grass grows at that spot to this day. Saint Athemos has since become known as the hunter and the terrorizer of serpents, and is given the epithet Ophidiotic, Ophidioctis, or serpent hunter. For this reason, the nuns of the sacred monastery of Panagia Eleusia in Kalymnos have painted an icon of the saint which remains in the Metochion of Saint Macrina, in a remote rural location of the island, and serves as the elixirium from reptiles. Against Fear of Ghosts by Archpriest Grigory Dyanchenko. And when the disciples saw Jesus walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "And it is a ghost," and they cried out for fear. Matthew 14:26. We have many bad habits, customs, and rituals that have remained from ancient times when our ancestors were still pagans. However, what is characteristic of pagans is improper for us Christians. For example, many of us suffer from a fear of ghosts. They are afraid to be alone in a room at night, and they even fear stepping outside into the darkness. Every dark corner appears to them as a dread specter, and places where the corpse lay just a few days ago, or when passing through a cemetery at night, such fear knows no bounds. Likewise, how much timidity and fear are felt upon entering a forest or any secluded place. Fear has big eyes, as the Russian proverb goes. Thus, the slightest noise or rustle in a deserted area, especially at night, the echo in the forest, the shadow of a tree swaying in the wind, all of this sends the soul into indescribable shudders. Consequently, it often happens that extraordinary phenomena are perceived in places where in reality they do not exist at all. This fear of ghosts, common among many adults, is often transmitted to children as well. There are instances where some individuals may not possess a superstitious fear and do not believe in ghosts or apparitions, yet they frequently frighten children with such tales. In an attempt to comfort a crying child, they may point to a dark corner, threatening that a monster will emerge from there. Or they often occupy children in the evenings with stories about various apparitions that supposedly appeared to people. All of this greatly fuels the already vivid imagination of the child and instills in their soul a superstitious fear from which they may struggle to free themselves throughout their lives. Such individuals tend to be timid and indecisive. They are incapable of undertaking any difficult feats or courageously facing the dangers and adversities of life. This is the harmful consequence of superstitious fear. Moreover, the fear of certain apparitions is unbecoming of a Christian. After all, it is a remnant of the religious beliefs of our ancestors, the pagans. They believed that the souls of the deceased wandered like shadows, both in graveyards and the places where these individuals once lived. They believed in countless spirits residing in houses and barns, in forests and swamps, as well as in rivers and lakes. They believed that all of these entities could cause harm to a person upon encountering them, and thus they lived in enslaved fear of them. These misconceptions of our ancestors have been passed down to us Christians. Hence, we find ourselves fearful of various household spirits, forest dwellers, and we dread ghosts. Yet, how unforgivable this superstitious fear is for a Christian. Consider carefully what a Christian might fear when under the protection and providence of the all-knowing, all-benevolent, and all-powerful God. Each of us can say with the prophet David, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is my strength, is the strength of my life, of whom shall I be afraid? Though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident." Psalms 26, 1 through 3. If there is anyone a Christian might fear, it is evil spirits, yet even they cannot cause him the slightest harm without God's permission. Moreover, it is within our power to drive away evil spirits. God has granted us reliable means against the devil. Prayer, fasting, and virtuous life. On the other hand, demons have power over unbelieving and wicked people. The holy martyr Tryphon, at a young age, healed illnesses and cast out demons. The Roman Emperor Gordian, whose daughter had been freed from a demon by the holy martyr Tryphon, wished to see the expelled demon with her own eyes. Saint Tryphon commanded the demon to appear, and everyone saw it in the form of a black dog with fiery eyes. The holy martyr asked the demon, "Who sent you to the maiden?" The demon replied, "The Father, the chief of all wickedness, sitting in Hades." "Who has given you such power?" asked Saint Tryphon. The demon replied, "We have no power over those who know God and believe in the only begotten Son of God. We only by God's permission inflict upon them light temptations, but we have complete power over those who do not believe in God, who walk in their lusts and carry out what pleases us. And the deeds pleasing to us are idolatry, blasphemy, adultery, envy, murder, and so forth. These people are ensnared by sins like in nets. They are our friends and together with us await their fate. Therefore, if you wish, Christian, to not fear evil spirits, lead a God-pleasing and pious life. As for the fear of the dead, this fear is also unfounded. Our faith teaches that the souls of our departed fathers and brethren find rest in the places appointed for them by God, and do not wander through graveyards of their former homes. Indeed, deceased individuals live a special life in the afterworld, and by God's will may appear to us sinners on earth. But what is so frightening about our loved ones appearing to us in dreams? Such occurrence brings us nothing but joy and comfort. There are many examples of not only saints, but also sinful people appearing to those alive on earth for their admonishment and assurance in the afterlife. And these appearances did not invoke the superstitious fear that many of us feel from some imagined specters in graveyards. Let us recount one story from our natural history. In 1812, our fatherland was struck by a terrible disaster. Hordes of enemies led by Napoleon advanced into Russia, causing horrific devastation along their path. And so, when Napoleon had taken Moscow, Prince Eugene, the Italian viceroy, set out with a troop of soldiers from Moscow towards Zvenigorod. He occupied quarters in the monastery of the Venerable of Savas of Storozhev, a disciple of the Venerable Sergius of Razdona. Around 10 o'clock, without undressing, the prince lay down and fell asleep. But whether in reality or in a dream, he did not know. He saw a man in a long black garment entering the room, approaching him so closely that in the moonlight he could discern the features of his face. He appeared old, with a gray beard. This man said, "Do not command your troops to plunder the monastery, especially to take anything from the church. If you fulfill my request, God will have mercy on you, and you will return home safe and sound." The prince issued an order in the morning for the detachment to return to Moscow, and he himself went to the church, where at the relics of the Venerable Savas he saw the likeness of the one who had appeared to him during the night. And recognizing whose likeness it was, he reverently bowed before the relics and recorded thus in his book: "All other commanders of Napoleon met with misfortune, but Eugene remained unharmed and was not wounded in any battles thereafter. He bequeathed to his son Maximilian that if he were in Russia, he should venerate the relics of the Venerable Savas." The son arrived in Russia in 1839 during the reign of Emperor Nicholas Pavlovich, and after the maneuvers at the Borodino field, he inquired about the monastery of St. Savas, traveled there, and paid veneration to the saint. The appearance of deceased individuals, especially the righteous, is so beneficial for us, the living on earth. Judge for yourselves whether there is any basis to fear the dead after this. If the deceased do appear in dreams, they can cause us no harm. Rather, they bring only good. That is, they convince us of the truth of our soul's immortality, expose our sins, and guide us on the path of truth. Therefore, such apparitions should be cherished and not feared. Archpriest Grigory Dyanchenko. Pull up the next story for us. Hope you guys enjoy these Orthodox stories. the spiritual world on the existence of demons. In Memoirs of the Polish Rebellion of 1863 by Mr. I.N. Ponomarev and the September issue of Historyczny Westnik for 1896, the author recounts the following inexplicable fact, which he himself witnessed together with the officers of the Ulan Regiment, where the author was released from the Corps shortly before the start of the 1863 uprising. The author tells us, the 3rd Squadron in which I was assigned to the camp in the village of Kvitki, located 10 miles from the headquarters that remained in the city of Korsun, Kiev province. The large village consisted of several hundred houses, and since in Little Russia almost every house has a garden, Kvitki, buried in greenery, occupied several miles in circumference. The quartermasters who met us announced that there were no comfortable apartments for the officers, and the only tolerable premises were allocated for the squadron commander, adding that there was a good private residence, but they did not dare to occupy it either. On what grounds did you not take him? Asked the senior officer, turning to the non-commissioned officer. Your Honor, according to the peasants, evil spirits have been inhabiting the place for several years now. What nonsense are you talking about? The officer cried out with a laugh. It was probably the women who told you this. No, Your Honor, for this reason the manager left it, and not a single peasant will touch the apples and pears in the garden. Is the house nice? Good, Your Honor. 4 large rooms, a kitchen, and a servant's room. Can we all fit? Staff Captain Markovich continued to interrogate. Quite, Your Honor. Will they give her up for boarding? With great pleasure. We happily agreed, and 6 officers and 8 servants headed to the enchanted house. The house was 1 story, surrounded by a large orchard, and decently furnished. As soon as the manager learned of our desire to take the premises, he came to us at once. He was a man of about 60 years old with a very good-natured face. This is what he told us. I've been serving his lordship for about 30 years, and 5 years ago I was transferred from another farm. Since the day of my move, there was a hum in this house at night, reminiscent of a groan, and sometimes it happened that some invisible hand rearranged all the furniture. Somehow I suffered for 2 months, but then I could not stand it, and with the Lord's permission I moved to another house. There are lots of apples and pears in the garden, but you can make any peasant rich. He will still not touch the fruit. There is a legend that this place is cursed and that here, several decades ago, one of the managers in delirium tremens slaughtered his entire family, including an infant. My predecessor did not listen to the peasants and built a little house here. He lived in it for about 5 months, and one morning they found him lying on the floor without any signs of life. So I took his place, and maybe with your arrival, he finished his story, everything will be fine and the evil spirits will leave this house alone. Having thanked the manager for the information he had given us, which had not changed our decision in the least, we settled down nicely in the room favored by the sons of hell. Having gathered in the dining room, we chatted cheerfully, recalling the old camp. Suddenly there was a rumble as if someone was hammering on iron, and then a groan was heard in the house. We looked at the clock. It was exactly 11:45. The frightened servants jumped out of the kitchen and ran to us. With lanterns in their hands, they examined the whole house, all the nooks and crannies, visited the cellar, walked around the garden, and found nothing suspicious anywhere. The rumble continued until 11:45, and then everything became quiet. Thus is the first benefit performance that has been arranged for us, said Captain Markovich. You know, gentlemen, I'm ready to bet that this is nothing other than some kind of hoax. Perhaps someone needs this house to be free of lodgings, so they blamed it all on devilry. Tomorrow I'll start looking for the dungeon, and when I find it, the spirit will disappear. We took part in the search but did not find the dungeon. It was assumed that someone was getting into the garden at night and hiding there, was playing mysterious music, and so with the permission of the squadron commander, Major Osmanov, sentries were posted in the garden and around the house in the evening, but nothing helped. The next day, exactly from 12:15 to 1:15, the same thing happened as the day before. The sentries also heard a groan as if coming from our premises. If our servants had not consisted of orderlies, we would have lost them. Only strict discipline could keep them in that place. One of the young officers told us that his nerves were so frayed that he immediately went to look for a room. No matter how hard we tried to persuade him, nothing helped. An hour later, he returned very pleased, since he'd managed to rent a room from a peasant for 3 rubles a month. His orderly, probably overjoyed at leaving the cursed place, got drunk and was forced to have him arrested. With the help of our orderlies, the comrade moved to a new apartment. At the appointed hour, the hum resumed, and a half an hour later, everything was quiet. We went to bed. Not more than 20 minutes had passed since then when there was a loud knock at the door, and immediately after that, we heard the voice of the man who left us. "Gentlemen, open the door quickly, it's me." Our comrade came in amongst us, pale as a sheet. "What happened to you?" we cried out in unison. "Now listen, at 12 o'clock I went to bed. After the excitement I had experienced, I gladly looked around my tiny room. Suddenly someone knocked on my door. Assuming it was the owner, I asked, 'Who's there?' There was no answer, but the knock, even louder this time, was repeated. My orderly, as you know, is under arrest, but I, wanting to show whoever was knocking at my door that I was not alone, said loudly, 'Ivan, look who's there.' And after them was a third knock, but it was so loud that the door shook. The thought flashed through my mind that the peasants have rebelled again, and taking advantage of my solitude, had decided to attack me. Well, I thought to myself, I won't sell you my life cheaply. Instantly, I jumped out of bed, put on my coat, snatched my saber from its sheath, took it in my left hand and my revolver in my right. Going up to the door, I pushed the hook aside with my elbow and opened the door with my foot. The corridor was empty. The exit door was locked with a wooden beam. Here, gentlemen, I got goosebumps. I returned to the room, lit the lantern, and blew out the candle. Having put my saber in the corner of the corridor, I opened the beam and went out into the vegetable garden. It was pitch black outside, and despite the fact that I had a lantern, I couldn't find the gate. I had to climb over the fence. I caught my spur on the fence and, of course, fell to the ground. The lantern broke and went out, and my weapon fell out of my hands. I barely found it and barely made it to you." At this phrase, Homeric laughter rang out. It was so infectious that he burst out laughing himself. The next day, our comrade, having released his orderly from custody, sent him out for things, and also ordered him to bring the owner of his apartment. We were all assembled when he came to the call. He was an old man, about 70 years old, white as a harrier. "Well, brother, take the ruble given to you as a deposit, and I won't return to your accursed hut again." "Thank you, Your Honor, for your kindness, but I brought you your money back. I shouldn't have deceived you in my old age, but poverty made me tempt myself with these 3 rubles. And so I had to blush for the deception." "What deception?" "It was necessary to reveal the whole truth to Your Honor. You see, I had an only son, a kind, quiet lad. When he was 20, I married him off. He had an exemplary wife, and they lived in perfect harmony. A year later, the woman bore me a granddaughter and gave her soul to God. After that, my dear son withered away, and a year later he himself went to the next world with his beloved woman." There were tears in the old man's voice. "My granddaughter may the kingdom of heaven be hers, was a beauty just like my late son. My old woman and I found only comfort in her. When she grew up well, suitors began to fawn over her. They were rich, but she, a beauty, did not like them. We had one bachelor, a soldier's son. The granddaughter fell in love with him, and she began to ask for our blessing. The old woman and I were even glad that since we were taking a bachelor into the house, our granddaughter would stay with us. They got married, they lived happily for 2 years. Only one thing was missing: children. We began to notice that our adopted son was becoming thoughtful. No matter how we asked him, he remained silent. Later, it turned out that he was jealous of our dove for some guy, and God knows, in vain. One night he stabbed Masha, and he wanted to kill himself, but the Lord did not let him die. He was cured, and the court sent Peter to hard labor. He did not reach the place. He died on the way. Since then, twice a month, someone knocks on the door. For this very reason, we moved from this room. Here, Your Honor, your ruble. Forgive me, an old man, my sin. Officers from the regiment headquarters came almost daily to personally verify the mysterious knock. Having heard enough of it, they themselves conducted searches but achieved no results. Soon we received an order to go into winter quarters in the town of Mezhibizh, Podolsk province, and the question of mysterious phenomenon remained unexplained. September 1896. Devils. So I'll continue reading on from Tools of Spiritual Warfare, where we left off about prayer and fasting. Although I know that I should call out to God for help when I am attacked by a passionate thought, I find it hard to do so consistently. Often I am not really paying attention to my thoughts, so all sorts of thoughts come and go in my mind without my paying much attention to them. The fathers of the church warn against this kind of lazy thought life. When I am not paying attention to my thoughts, a passionate thought will sometimes grip me, and I will not notice it until my emotions are stirred up. By this time, it takes a lot of effort to call out to God for help, because not only are my emotions stirred up, but I find my body is also being influenced by the passion. If it is a passion of anger, I find my heart beating fast, or if it is a passion of gluttony, I want to eat something that I shouldn't. I find myself hungry and even salivating. At this point, not only are we battling thoughts, but feelings and bodily reactions too. But even at this point, it is not too late to call on God, control our bodies and mind, and receive help from Him. However, it is much easier if we catch the passionate thought while it is still just a thought. It is like pulling weeds. I have a neighbor who has wild cherry trees that spring up around her house. The birds pluck the wild cherries from around the neighborhood and drop the seeds everywhere. In the spring, the little cherry trees sprout up. If she gets out and pulls them up in the spring, she can do it easily with 2 fingers. But if she lets them grow through the summer, she has to grab them with 2 hands and pull with all her might. If she lets them grow a whole year, she needs a shovel to dig them out. Fighting against passionate thoughts is the same. We cannot stop the seeds of sin from landing in our minds. The demons are like the birds dropping seeds of sin everywhere. But we can pay attention, and as soon as an inappropriate thought comes to our mind, we can immediately call out to God for help, and the thought flees with very little effort. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, the sinner. But if we let the thoughts linger, it becomes more and more difficult and sometimes more and more painful to expel it. Prayer and fasting, a mighty duo. Sometimes prayer by itself isn't sufficient, and when we combine fasting with our prayer, then we have a very powerful tool. This is what happened when the Lord's disciples could not cast out the demon of epilepsy from a young boy. Jesus chastised them for their lack of faith and belief. In Matthew 17:21, he tells them that these kind of demons only come out by prayer and fasting, and then he commands the demon to depart. Sickness, especially epilepsy, is often connected to demonic activity in Scripture, yet the disciples could not banish Satan. A good example of the power of combining prayer and fasting is the ascetic Valentios, who was a wilderness dweller and a struggler. Valentios fell into spiritual delusion. His great pride and self-esteem led him astray. Instead of testing the spirits, as St. John admonishes us to do in 1 John 4:1 through 3, he believed his dreams. The demons disguised as angels of light appeared to him in his dreams and led him to believe that God was pleased with him because he struggled. The golden rule of spiritual warfare is if it feeds your pride, throw it out. This not only applies to our thoughts, but to our dreams and visions. God would never go against his own teaching and tempt our pride. James writes in his epistle, God resists the proud. The other monks realized that Valentios was suffering from spiritual delusion, and so for a solid year they devoted themselves to prayer and fasting for Valentios in the hopes that he would be delivered from this demon of vainglory. They were successful. Thank God for faithful brethren who pray ceaselessly for the salvation of their brothers' souls. We must do this for one another. Fasting plays an important role in prayer. St. John of Kronstadt has this to say about prayer and fasting. Do not hasten to eat and drink, but rather hearken to perform God's service. And when performing God's service, do not think about food and drink. Those who go to attend divine service after having eaten heavily voluntarily lay upon themselves an unnecessary and harmful burden. They deaden the heart before prayer and obstruct the access of holy thoughts and feelings to it. If you yourself are free from attachments to material things and give yourself to prayer and fasting, then even in you the Spirit will, as it were, swallow up the flesh, and you will become spiritual. And behold, God the Spirit everywhere in nature. St. John of Kronstadt teaches that the demons can enter our hearts through gluttony and lack of prayer, and concludes that they can thereby be driven out by their opposites, i.e., prayer and fasting. He writes, the incorporeal enemy enters the heart of a man through gluttony and drunkenness. This can be felt by anyone who is observant. This is why, with the growth of drunkenness, the tendency to drunkenness increases so horribly. The power of the enemy over the man increases. This is why you notice in drunkards a power involuntarily drawing them to satisfy the inward craving for drink. The enemy dwells in the hearts of these unhappy people. How can the demon of drunkenness be driven out? By prayer and fasting. The enemy enters the hearts of men because they have given themselves up to a carnal mode of life, to gluttony, and because they do not pray. It is but natural, therefore, that he can be driven out by the opposite means, prayer and fasting. Matthew the Poor tells us that fasting elevates the flesh to the level of war with the spirits of evil, those powers that hold sway over our weakest part, the flesh. He also makes it clear that it was not for himself that he, Jesus, fasted 40 days. It was for us, that we might imitate Christ. Matthew the Poor encourages us with the words, and those who fast win Christ's victory over the prince of this world. We must discipline ourselves to fast from food and pray more if we have a deep rooted concern for the salvation of the soul of a loved one. If total abstinence from food is difficult for you, start with small steps by abstaining first for half a day, then a full day, and then, if you can, 2 days. Fasting should be undertaken under the guidance of your spiritual father and with his blessing. In time, you will have strengthened your spiritual muscles through spiritual exercising, and you will be able to gain control of your body in this way. Instead of your body, your flesh dictating to you, your spirit will dictate to the flesh. Christ said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Matthew 26:41. It is therefore important to feed our spirit that it may become stronger than the flesh. St. John confirms this in his first epistle when he writes, greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. 1 John 4:4. We must draw on his greatness within us, who helps us to overcome the world and the flesh. It's no use fasting if it isn't accompanied with prayer. In the absence of prayer, it becomes dieting. Necessary prayer, the Mother of God and her intercessions. The intercessory prayer of the saints is another very important tool of spiritual warfare, and we must especially never forget the role of our Blessed Lady Theotokos. Theotokos means God's birth giver, and it is the name most commonly used by Orthodox Christian when referring to Mary, the mother of Jesus. Part of relying on God's help is relying on the help of the saints, especially the Lord's mother. I remember a story I heard when I was young about a rescue operation in a flooded area. A man was sitting on his roof, his house surrounded by rising water. A rescue boat came by to pick him up, but the man refused to get into the boat. Why won't you get in the boat? The confused rescue worker asked. I'm waiting for God to save me, was the man's reply. In the same way, I think that some of us ask God to save us, but refuse the help that He offers. God offers us the intercessions of the saints. When we do not ask for their intercessions, we are like the man sitting on his roof during a flood and refusing to get into the rescue boat. Throughout the ages, Christians have found the intercessions of the Theotokos to be particularly helpful in times of distress and danger. This is not the place to discuss the theology of the intercession of the saints. Here, I just want to inspire and encouraging you to try it. If you have never prayed to the Theotokos, your patron saint or your guardian angel, you've missed a great deal of help that God has been offering you. And Father Arseni, 1893 to 1973, priest, prisoner, spiritual father, there's a story told that illustrates the effectiveness of our Holy Mother's prayers. A young Russian woman named Maria left her girlfriend's home around 11 p.m., and as she ran through a clump of trees to catch the train home, she was grabbed by her arms in the dark and a bag thrown over her head. Two men gagged her and flashed a knife and warned her that if she yelled, they would cut her to pieces. She was ordered to lie down. She knew she was helpless to defend herself, and so she immediately turned to God for help. The only prayer she could remember was from a verse from the Lenten prayer service asking the Mother of God, Theotokos, O victorious leader of triumphant hosts, we your servants delivered from evil, sing our grateful thanks to you, O Mother of God, as you possess the invincible power to set us free from every danger, so that we may sing, Rejoice, O unwedded bride. She continued to say this prayer as the taller of the two men tore her clothing off and bent over her. Without realizing it, she prayed out loud, and the man asked her what it was she was mumbling. He suddenly stopped and angrily kicked and told her to get up. She kept praying. He led her away from his accomplice to another spot, where he again threw her to the ground. As he stood over her, she continued to cry out to the Mother of God. She felt she was no longer alone. The Theotokos was with her. The man looked above her head and exclaimed, What does she need here in the woods at night? He picked her up and threw his knife away and led her deeper into the woods. He threw her clothes at her and told her to get dressed. He even turned his head away as she hurriedly dressed. The man explained later upon seeing an icon of the Mother of God, She's the one I saw. And because of the holiness of her presence, the man who was about to rape her was ashamed to even watch her dress. He could no longer look at her in the same way. He walked her to the train station, bought her a ticket, and washed away the blood that was on her forehead from the initial blow she received when first attacked. All the while she prayed to the Mother of God, he accompanied her to her home and left her there. She went immediately to her icon of the Mother of God and prayed all night, thanking the Theotokos for help. Not only did the Theotokos save the young woman from the attacker, but she saved the soul of the attacker as well. He appeared at her doorstep a year later. Maria's mother welcomed the man who had come to see her daughter into the house. Maria had never shared her terrible experience with her family. Maria froze when he entered the room. Then he saw the icon of the Mother of God, of Vladimir, and exclaimed, She's the one. He told Maria not to be afraid that he had come to ask for her forgiveness. He asked her repeatedly, but she couldn't move or speak. He left. A few years later, during World War II, in the spring of 1943, Maria answered a knock at her door. A lieutenant named Andrei came carrying a big bag, and leaning on a stick entered her home saying, I'm here to see you. Suddenly, Maria realized that it was her intended rapist. Before Maria could say or do anything, Andrei came in, opened the bag full of food. Many in Moscow were starving or nearly starving at this point of the war, and he began telling his story. He told how he had been seriously wounded and in the hospital for 3 months. He didn't think he would live. While in the hospital, he remembered Maria and the prayer to the Mother of God, and so he prayed as she had done. He had heard the doctors say that he would not live. His brother had brought him the food, and now he brought it to Maria and her family. He saw the cupboard open where the family icons were stored, and he went up to the Mother of God, blessed himself with the sign of the cross, and turned to Maria, saying, Forgive me in the name of the Lord, I beg you. My past obsesses me constantly. I feel terrible. Feeling nothing but anger, Maria would not forgive him. She demanded that he leave and take his food gifts with him. Refusing to take the food away, Andrei bowed to Maria and left. Before leaving, he bowed to her. When he left, Maria sobbed. Her mother asked why she was crying. Maria told her the story of what had happened to her. In spite of what the mother heard, she remarked that he was a good man and that she should pray for him. He saved her family from starvation that year. One evening, Maria finally talked with Andre. He told her how confused and surprised he had been when he'd heard her whispering something and suddenly seen a woman next to her. He told her that the woman halted him with a commanding gesture. He also explained that when he'd thrown her on the ground the second time, the woman had protected Maria with one arm and that had frightened him. That's when he decided to let her go. He'd seen the Mother of God. His conscience would not leave him in peace. He was ashamed and decided to go to Maria's house and apologize. When he saw the icon of the Mother of God in Maria's room, he understood that she was the one who had protected Maria. When he left, he asked everyone he could to tell him about her. He became a believer. Andre had visited many times. Maria's mother told her that the Mother of God had shown Andre a great miracle and that she hadn't shown it only to Maria, but to Andre. She told her daughter, "You believed that your prayer saved you, but it was the Mother of God herself who stopped Andre. Believe me, she would not have appeared to an unworthy man. The Mother of God will never leave Andre, and you must forgive him." She understood that since he had been under the influence of alcohol that night, that it wasn't Andre who was attempting this rape, it was the devil through the alcohol. She understood that Andre too was created in the image of God. She was a devout, righteous woman who had raised her daughter in the church and had taught her to pray. Maria forgave Andre, and in 1952 she received a letter from Andre. Thank you, all of you. I know I was frightening to you, but you did not push me away. As perhaps the hardest time of my life, you gave me support by forgiving me. The Mother of God was a helper and protector for you and for me. You owe your life to her, and I am even more grateful to her because I owe her the faith which gives me life, human and spiritual life. She gave me life and protected me during the war. May the Mother of God save and protect you. I am finally living as a Christian. Andre. We see from this story the power of forgiveness. Mary is our protectress. Turn to her in the hour of need and she will help. If you are having trouble with sexual perversions, masturbation, impure thoughts, lustful images, etc., ask the Blessed Mother of God to take these from you and she will. You must want to be rid of these evils. She will do the rest if you desire. If the desire comes back, ask her again. I promise you she will help you just as she helped Maria and Andre. I speak from experience here. Alcohol is a demon. Us men, we're almost brainwashed into thinking that we need to drink alcohol, that it's somehow a manly thing to do. But it never does anything good for us. It only causes evil. It causes so much violence. Most of the children that experience abuse in this country and around the world are abused at the hands of drunkards. The Mother of God understands a mother's sorrow. I began developing my relationship with the Mother of God when my 23-year-old son Douglas was killed in 1991. His death was sudden and needless. Nevertheless, it was the Father's will. I accept that, like Maria in the story from Father Arseni's book, I turned for comfort during the most difficult period of my life to our Blessed Lady Theotokos. I had lost my mother when I was 8 years old. My 18-year-old brother had been killed by a car. My 11-year-old sister had been killed in an airplane crash coming from Canada to visit with me and my family. My husband died of cancer at Christmas time, leaving me with two sons aged 4 and 5. Although I had experienced so much death, the loss of my son would prove to be the most painful. It's out of the natural order. Parents are supposed to die before their children. I knew that our most glorious and blessed Lady Theotokos understood the pain of a mother losing her child. She had been through it. Since she had stood at the foot of his cross, where her son hung suspended in the agony of the flesh. She gave me peace and hope. She gave me great comfort. I was calm and collected at my son's funeral because of her intercessions on my behalf. People thought I was in shock, when in fact I was at peace. She protected me, she held me, she supported me, she gave me strength. She became my bulwark. She is truly a fount of mercies. Like Andre, I thank God she was my helper and protectress from the assaults of the demons of despair and anguish. Coming up on about an hour there. I'm trying to keep these all about an hour. Of course, I'll be back on with some more reading a little bit later. But I hope all of you don't drink. Alcohol caused me so much problems as a child. My fathers and uncles were drunk a lot, and they were abusive when that happened. I think maybe the drinking age here in America causes so many problems. People make it to age 21 and they just go wild and reckless with drink. But having lived in Europe for a while, where there wasn't a drinking age in Eastern Europe where I was at, it was a lot different. The kids didn't seem to have a gluttony for alcohol. There wasn't a lot of big parties and things like this. People were responsible and didn't seem to me go drinking to get drunk. It was more something that people did in other countries. Maybe the British seemed to have problems with alcoholism, and they really stood out like a sore thumb because they'd be the only people drunk in the part of Eastern Europe I was in. And I watched even one time a British tourist was so drunk that the people on the tram, old men and young men, grabbed him by his clothing and tossed him headfirst out of the tram into the sidewalk because he was being so disruptive. Alcohol is so bad in this country. So much of the violence comes from us or from it. So I hope you don't drink. And if you have a problem with drinking, pray to the Mother of God to help you overcome your passion. Ask the Lord to give you strength to overcome it. You'll be so much better off without it. I can tell you from experience, I don't drink anymore. And I don't miss it, and I don't need it. And I hear a lot of my friends still talking about how much they drank and bragging about it, or chasing the lusts of the flesh, and going bar to bar and still living totally lost in a state of darkness, of spiritual darkness. It's closed them off to so much good in their lives that they could be experiencing instead. But instead, they're living in the devil's delusion. Give it a try. If you're drinking, stop drinking. I'll be back on in a little bit to read more orthodox stuff for us. I'm going to make myself something to eat. Something simple, probably just a tin of fish and some pasta. And I'll find some more articles for us. So thank you all for joining me. And if you want to support my small farmer channel, not that you have to, don't feel obligated. It's just paypal.me/Pike A, capital P, lowercase I-K-E, capital A. paypal.me/Pike A. And God bless you all. And I'll do prayers for us after the end of the next stream. Well, God bless all of you, brothers and sisters. Amen. I'll see you in a bit. Paka paka.